So, today I want to talk about Miami Beach, spring break, COVID, and racism. I know that's a lot, but this story has a lot to it. So, first and foremost, I want to address what's going on in this situation. Well, this time of year in the United States is prime time for spring break. And under normal circumstances, it would mean that a lot of college age people would be traveling to a number of different locations and partying, essentially. However, with the pandemic being what it is, the number of locations that people are traveling to has been greatly reduced. The three states that have chosen to remain open to spring break are Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Now, I want to say first and foremost that I do not believe any of these states should be open for spring break, or any large gatherings, to be perfectly honest. The CDC is still against people traveling, even if they have been vaccinated. There continues to be mutations of the coronavirus, and breakthrough cases are occurring in which people who have been vaccinated and gotten both shots are still getting the virus. And I think it's just too early to rely on this vaccine to kind of create this new normal, especially with a party atmosphere like spring break tends to create. So, with that said, I believe that this fault of people gathering actually relies on the state governors for allowing the states to open in the first place. Many of the people coming out to spring break have been in lockdown situations for over a year now. And they're being told by these state governors that it's safe to come down and to enjoy the tourist industry there. That is, again, despite CDC guidelines and the US government saying more or less otherwise. And while I do think each individual is making a somewhat poor decision in going down, I believe that the responsibility does lie on the state governors who have allowed and enabled spring breaks to happen, and again have said that it's safe and made it open and available to people. So then the question becomes, why are we talking about Miami Beach as opposed to any of the other locations, the other tourist hotspots, as it were? Well, the simple answer for this is racism, but I want to take the time to explore that. So, I want to do this by first looking at the perspective of Miami Beach's government, and then I want to show why that perspective is problematic from three different lenses. First, the uniqueness of Miami Beach. Second is the history of tourism and police response in the area. And the third is the different behavior of Miami Beach towards more upper class and white gatherings. So, with that said, let's take a look at the perspectives of the government of Miami Beach and their response. So, the Miami Beach police chief has basically said that the partying couldn't go on any longer. During a last-minute meeting Sunday, city officials voted to extend a highly unusual 8 p.m. curfew for another week along famed South Beach, with the possibility of extending it well into April. And since this article has come out, it has been confirmed that they will be extending the curfew to April 12th. So as it's been this has not been the typical spring break crowd. They said it's not college students, but adults looking to let loose in one of the few states fully open during the pandemic. Now, I have seen no evidence of that, and I think that's a problematic statement, which I'll go over. Further, many are coming to, quote, engage in lawlessness and an anything goes party attitude. He also noted that the crowds weren't eating at restaurants or patronizing businesses generating badly needed tourism dollars, but merely congregating by the thousands in the street. In the meantime, officers in bulletproof vests dispersed pepper spray balls Saturday night into a defiant but mostly nonviolent crowd, refusing to submit to the curfew that had only been enacted 4 hours earlier. Only 4 hours for that to get out there. Further, military-style vehicles were seen rolling down the palm tree-lined Ocean Drive, and more happens, where Miami tourism officials say billions of dollars were lost last year when the pandemic first erupted, canceling the spring break and forcing beach closures across the Sunshine State. The city's tourism arm just spent $5 million on its biggest national advertising campaign in nearly 20 years, At the same time, local officials banned alcohol from the beach along with all alcohol sales after 10 p.m. in an effort to curb partying. The city even sent cell phone text messages to tourists warning vacation responsibly or be arrested. I just feel like it's not really fair. People paid a lot of money to come all the way out here just to not be able to do the activities they wanted to do. This one tourist, Heather Price, told NBC6. So when we look at all of those details, there's a lot wrong here. First and foremost, the idea that it's not just college students but adults coming down, to deal with the aftermath of the pandemic. I haven't seen again any evidence of that outside of the city's language. Furthermore, the idea that they are coming to engage in lawlessness and have a party attitude, that's kind of the mentality that goes into a spring break. In fact, that is the mentality you see in a lot of spring breaks across the United States, and definitely when a lot of tourists go down to Cancun. That they're going to have a party atmosphere and they're going to live it up and they're going to do all sorts of things and there might be some rule breaking and all this other stuff. So the question becomes, why are they emphasizing this in Miami Beach as opposed to anywhere else? And the fact of the matter is that Miami Beach is one of the only spots that's still open that has historically been an area where people of color, and specifically black people, have gathered for spring break. And that is the only reason I can see this being an issue. As a matter of fact, the idea is that over the course of the past 20 years, it has been a popular party spot on Memorial Day and during spring break for black tourists. And in recent years, spring break has drawn more and more black tourists, and of course, that has come with more and more officers. Confrontations circulate quickly on social media. Last year, when video of rough arrests went viral, the head of the NAACP chapter for Miami-Dade, the county, had basically called for the police chief to resign. Another person, Aline Torres, a 46-year-old Afro-Latina South Beach resident, said that she's also concerned about the way some Miami Beach residents talk about black tourists publicly and online. On private Facebook pages, Torres said some have called the spring breakers animals, and one person, she said, went as far as to recommend someone turn the hose to disperse crowds. They dehumanize us, Torres said. So that is an issue in and of itself. And the fact of the matter is, when examining, the uniqueness of Miami Beach in this situation, I have not found a single piece of evidence to show that any other location has gotten the scrutiny that Miami Beach has in terms of the tourist populations coming to visit it. No other place in Miami or, the Miami area, no other place in Florida, no other place in Texas or Georgia has received the same amount of scrutiny. So one has to assume that all of this has to do with the race of the tourists that are coming to visit the city. Furthermore, within this structure and understanding, some local members of the black community have called this out as being explicitly racist. So it's not hard to see that this is a unique situation in Miami Beach where other locations have not had this same treatment. To make matters worse, as we showed, there's a history of police presence rising while the tourism in the area is predominantly black. And so with both of those in mind, it is quite easy to show that this has a racist side to it. Even though, there's this call for dispersals because of the pandemic and because of everything else, coded under all of that is this underlying message that people of color do not belong in this area. And that is a problem. That is a huge, huge problem. One person, Stephen Hunter Johnson, the chairman of Miami-Dade's Black Affairs Advisory Committee, had said, "I am very disappointed. I think when they're young black people on South Beach, the response is, 'Oh my God, we have to do something.' Videos on social media have shown Miami Beach police arriving on Ocean Drive Saturday evening to find a massive crowd still in the streets after the curfew kicked in. Videos also showed officers turning on the sirens, at one point firing pepper bowls into the crowd." This is horrific. This is absolutely horrific. And to make matters worse, in terms of the police response in the area, I looked up some of the statistics for the county. Miami-Dade or Dade County. And I found that the police department did not actually have any records in terms of race in their arrest records. I had to turn to the ACLU from Florida for that, in which we found the following statistics. And this is just for people who live in the area, not necessarily tourists. Black people have been arrested at higher rates than any other group. As a result, Black Hispanics comprise 4 times more of the arrested population than their share of the county's population, and Black non Hispanic arrestees comprise over 2 times more of the arrested population than their county population share. Black people are disproportionately arrested, even for crimes committed in largely white neighborhoods, and neighborhoods with large Black non Hispanic populations have higher arrest rates. The same disproportionately applies to not only felonies, but also to arrests for low level crimes. Furthermore, when white non Hispanics are arrested, they are less likely to be initially charged with a felony and more likely to be charged with a misdemeanor or ordinance violation. While alcohol related, disorderly intoxication, drinking in public, those type of crimes, and homelessness related, such as panhandling or loitering nuisance charges, are most common in the arrest of white non-Hispanics, blacks who are Hispanic and non-Hispanics are more likely to be arrested for drug related nuisance crimes. So there's a lot of issues in the disparity of how the communities of color are treated in the neighborhood. And so we have this combination of the way the tourists are treated during this particular time, as well as the way people, especially black populations, are treated in their own communities. And to make matters worse, the things that I read to you about some of the treatments of people of color by the neighborhood and the things that are said about people in the community are actively terrible. All you have to do is go on Twitter, type in Miami Beach and spring break, and you will find a good number of people with either overtly explicit racist messages or more, implicit messages of racism that are listed there. And I'm not going to take the time to show those off because I think it would be a disservice to the larger message, but it is there. And if you want to take the time to see that, then I very much advise you to do so. But I just think that the level of racism in that is just way too high, and I just, it's gruesome, honestly, to see some of the messages that people have put out there, both within the community and without it. And I think a lot of it boils down to the idea that a bunch of people of color gathering scares white people. And it scares white people both from the historical racism that exists, and especially because, well, to be perfectly honest, the BLM protests that occurred last year have made a lot of white people very scared about what happens when a group of people of color gather. And I think that's the real issue here. And we see that emphasized in the fact that last year, when the coronavirus outbreak happened and they had to break down everything, the areas that were targeted in Miami Beach were between 5th and 15th Street, said a Mr. Roberts, who is the chair of the Miami-Dade chapter of the NAACP campaign group. And he basically said that the areas they shut down were specifically targeting the areas of people of color. Further, in the Miami New Times, Luther Campbell writes that another spring break in Miami Beach has gone to hell, and no one should be surprised. City leaders, starting with Mayor Dan Gelber, refuse to treat black tourists with the same respect they give to predominantly white affluent visitors, who come for Art Basel or the South Beach Wine and Food Festival and other fancy events. So basically these upper class events, these primarily white events that feature white artists and white wine tastings and food and all this other stuff, are treated quite well. And as a matter of fact, when we look at the story behind the Wine and Food Festival and how they're being treated when they come in May, all they're getting is vaccine testing results and all this very nice gestures about how they can come in as long as they've been, treated properly and all this other stuff. That is not the level at which the people of color and black populations who have come in during spring break have been treated. As a matter of fact, we've seen that they got met with police and curfews and all this other stuff. So Luther goes on to state that last year, after the NAACP and social justice activists condemned then city manager Jimmy Morales and the Miami Beach Police Department for the heavy-handed tactics against black tourists. I had a Zoom call with Gilbert and other city officials. I gave them the blueprint for dealing with future crowds over spring break and Memorial Day weekend, another unofficial event that draws young African Americans to the city. I suggested they plan city sanctioned and sponsored events on the beach where they could control the crowds and give people something to enjoy. It could have been set up with proper social distancing protocols and mass distribution to minimize the spread of COVID-19. The city, again, has no problem with hosting the South Beach Wine and Food Festival, which is requiring all participants to provide proof of a recent coronavirus test or vaccine. And you don't see Gilbert giving interviews about the large crowds that the festival is going to bring to Miami Beach. Instead, Miami Beach continues to turn into a virtual police state whenever black tourists come to town, when police officers have to don their protective vests and other riot-style equipment. They are going to get jacked up and agitated. Last Friday, we saw a swarm of cops body slam a young black man and use the pepper balls to disperse the crowd. So, given all of this background and all this information, it's not difficult to see that the three different factors that I mentioned before, the uniqueness of Miami Beach from every other tourist spot in the United States South, the history of tourism and police response in the area, not just to tourists, but to people of color in general that live there, as well as the different behavior of the Miami Beach government towards this particular set of events as compared to the upper class white gatherings, would dictate to me that there is a level of racism going on here that is completely inappropriate. And it's quite obvious to me that based on these factors, that racism is a huge issue. That again isn't even including the tweets and the Facebook messages and posts that have been describing people of color in very horrific ways. There is a huge race problem in Miami Beach. And it is, again, the only area that I've seen targeted towards, any sort of issues with people gathering. And to me, even though, again, I do not think that people should be gathering at this time, it's hard to justify the only area being targeted for the coronavirus being an area with primarily black tourists. That just reeks of racism. And while, again, I don't think people should be gathering, why should it be this specific area that's being targeted and is being used as a scapegoat for Ron DeSantis' failure? So with that said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara, and I hope you enjoyed watching.